I want to talk about the video that you released on June 4th, in which you said, "We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest." What motivated you to do that?
Well, we had spent the weeks prior to that, or the week and a half prior to that, listening, learning, trying to understand all the frustration and fear and sadness that all of us were going through, particularly those in the Black community. And I heard a lot from our players. And then a video came out on Thursday night, and I thought it was very powerful. I thought it was very clear, and I thought it was appropriate for me to respond directly to that and make it clear how we feel about the oppression of Black people and condemning racism, and the fact that we should have listened to our players earlier. Our players, including Colin Kaepernick, including Eric Reed, including Kenny Stills, and so many others, Malcolm Jenkins, so many people that to really brought these issues to light. And it actually predates and goes back to 2014 in Ferguson, when Michael Brown was killed by police brutality. Our players have been at the forefront in bringing attention to these issues and really working to try to make a difference in the communities. And we have been doing that over the last couple of years. And I'm proud of the work we're doing, but we all have more work to do, Mike.
This felt so different, though, than it did several years ago. What changed for you that made you decide this was the time to say something and to handle it completely differently than it had been in the past?
Well, I think we've done a couple things. One is our country was going through something where we were seeing these things that our players had highlighted, including Colin and so many others. What they were talking about and what they were protesting and what they were trying to bring attention to was playing out right in front of us, and tragically. And so all of us saw that, and it was difficult for all of us. And so that was an important point for us, but also to reinforce the fact that we had been doing a lot of work in our communities through our Players Coalition, Anquan Bolden, so many others that have provided leadership there. And the NFL has been supportive, our teams have been supportive, our players have been supportive in doing the hard work in our communities to try to address these issues, including criminal justice reform. I myself have been with our Players Coalition in several markets in New Orleans, seeing bail reform and watching the bail process with our players. It's heartbreaking, the work that needs to be done in those areas. Working with chiefs of police around our country. We were in Philadelphia, we were in Atlanta, talking with people in the criminal justice system about what we can do. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And as you probably saw last week, we not only committed through our words and by our actions, but also I think we're committing to do this for a longer period of time because we think these issues are systemic and they are things that are going to be needed to deal with over the long term. And that's something that's really important for us. So we increased our commitment from where it was to $250 million in a 10-year period. And I think we're going to do a lot of good, and our players are leading the way. Our teams are supporting them all the way, and so is the league.
What conversations have you had with the people who own the NFL teams about this? There have been some comments from them, but not across the board, and that has been pointed out in some places. What conversations have you had with the owners of the NFL teams about this?
Well, we've had conversations for several years about this, and they've been incredibly supportive, and supportive of their players, their communities, which are critically important here, and trying to make a difference. And they help fund efforts. They have been part of those efforts in action. They brought awareness to those issues in the communities. And I believe they're looking at where our society is now and saying, we, the NFL, need to step up and help solve the problems as best we can. And so they're incredibly supportive, and I think are going to help play a leadership role along with the rest of us.
You've mentioned Colin Kaepernick's name multiple times in this conversation. What role do you envision him playing going forward with the National Football League, be it as a player or in any other way? How do you see him factoring into the future?
Well, listen, if he wants to resume his career in the NFL, that obviously is going to take a team to make that decision. But I welcome that, support a club making that decision, and encourage them to do that. If his efforts are not on the field, but and continuing to work in this space, we welcome to that table and to be able to help us and guide us and help us make better decisions about the kinds of things that need to be done in communities. We have invited him in before, and we want to make sure that everybody's welcome at that table and trying to help us deal with some very complex, difficult issues that have been around, unfortunately, for a long time. But I hope we're at a point now where everybody's committed to making long-term sustainable change.
And Commissioner, I feel like I need to ask you about the president, who has tweeted, obviously, about issues involving the league many times. And one of the tweets recently was, could it be even remotely possible that in Roger Goodell's rather interesting statement of peace and reconciliation, he was intimating that it would now be okay for players to kneel or not to stand for the national anthem? How do you anticipate the president being involved in wherever it is the NFL goes going forward?
Mike, I can't answer that, but I can tell you that we're going to continue to focus on our work, the things that we're doing in our communities to make them better, working with our players, working with our teams, working with community leaders to try to effectuate the change that we all know is necessary today.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.